So yeah, I'm Vivian and I'm one of the industry outreach coordinators here at Design at ECI. And we also have Kevin.
Hello, I'm Kevin. I'm a second year informatics major here at Design UCI and also Outreach Cord. All right, so quick few announcements. First thing is that our project teams, presentations, and the autumn night market are both next week. So our PT teams have been working hard all quarter to create their projects, and they will be presenting. And next thing is our Design UCI stickers. You can order them at the QR code right there on the second, the left. And yeah, APO and Design UCI are hosting a design testing event. So if you're interested in getting any of your designs tested there, be sure to fill out the form at the QR code. And the last thing is that we have a Smash tourney for a fundraiser, and the signups are at that link. Be sure to check it out. And more details will be posted on our socials later.
And now to introduce our speakers and our reviewers, they'll be unmuting to introduce themselves. So yeah, take it away.
Want me to just jump in? Hi, I'm Courtney, and I'm a designer over at Amazon Web Services, and I'll be chatting today about all my insights that I have to share about portfolio reviews and tips and tricks for that. So looking forward to it.
Okay, so I guess I'll jump in next. I'm Lillian. I graduated from UC Davis. So UC family, I'm also in Irvine right now. So if you want to hit me up after the portfolio reviews, stay connected. That's great. I work as a UX designer at Samsung Electronics America in Mountain View. So I'll be moving there in February. So before that, we can meet up and talk about design. And today I hope to be somewhat helpful in terms of, giving feedback on your portfolio and industry advice, I would say. So yeah, nice to meet you guys. Thank you.
Dude, that's me. I had to unmute real quick. Hey, I'm Mike Heitsky. I'm a lead designer over at CarMax, building lots of interesting things in the logistics space there. And really excited to be here. Hopefully just to be able to provide some sort of insight, give some, stories, anecdotes, things that just kind of help along this process. And this is a process that I went through while I was in design school and found it immensely terrifying, but so helpful. Like I got so much out of it. So looking forward to doing this.
Hello, everybody. I'm Amanda. I'm the senior product designer at Solemn Build. I've been designing for most of my life. I used to be a marketer for 6 years. So I kind of can go through the gamut of updating your portfolio and interviewing, and can approach your portfolio from different perspectives. So I hope to be able to help out. And yeah, that's it for me.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Sinutko. I am a senior learning experience designer over at SiriusXM/Pandora. I actually just got this job, so I'm in like my third or fourth week, but it's all going really well. I was working at UCLA for 7.5 years before that. So it was a big move, and I'm going to be focusing on the graphic design portfolio review. So I'm looking forward to chatting with you all.
Okay. Also, now that we met our speakers, for all the attendees who came to our event, feel free to like rename yourselves with like your interest. And then so we have 3 options, whether it be like UX, product design, or graphic design. And then like based on like what you rename yourself, we'll be placing you guys out into breakout rooms later. So yeah, please do that as soon as you can. But yeah, moving on from that, we have our UX portfolio tips hosted by Courtney. So I'll hand it off to her.
Hello, and we are right on time. Congrats. This is great. Okay, so first I just wanted to give a quick introduction to me so you know who I am and what sort of nonsense I'm telling you what my background is. So I was before everyone joined, I was telling people that I actually have a background in engineering from Virginia Tech, and so I do not have an education in design. So that's something that feel free to ask me about. I assume all of you are getting an education in design, but so our backgrounds are going to look a little different. But my path to design was really from my first job that was in quality assurance at a software company in Portland, and that's where I really just had I had a really hard time signing off on things as high quality that I didn't think anyone could use. And so I ended up figuring out that design existed after asking who's making these requirements. And that was kind of my path. The sky opened and I figured out how to get myself in the field. So I've been a designer for about 10 years. I started at that first company in Portland, but then I've worked on the Best Buy mobile app, which the shopping cart is actually my design. I've been gone for 4 years and it's still there, which makes me very proud. And then for the last 4 years, I've been working at AWS, specifically on a product called CloudFormation. So very much an enterprise designer is how I identify. I live in Seattle. The fun fact about me is I live on a floating home. It's very fun. You can ask Hannah about it, for those who know Hannah. And for fun, I like to do crafty stuff. So we can move off of this. And so yeah, the big thing about portfolios to remember, and this is no fair to designers, but we have to do so much more work than anyone else to get hired. And it can be an incredible amount of work. And we usually have to do 2 portfolios, not just one. And so they're really different, and your case studies might be the same, but the way that you're going to present them are going to be really different. Before I jump in, I was just looking at how many interviews I've done also at Amazon. I've done like 111 in the 4 years that I've been there. And am I still coming through? I'll just say every single interview that I've been a part of includes a portfolio review. And I've also been a part of intern hiring, which is like rapid portfolio reviews. So this is, it's hard. What I found is that you don't really, I'll say being on the other side of it has helped me in my portfolio a lot. And that's just the unfortunate nature of it, that you don't get to be on the other side of it until you get the job first. So this is me trying to share all the things that I found out once I was on the other side of it. But the real things that I want to point out here is that you're going to have 2 different portfolios, one which is going to be offline, which means people are going to review it without you there explaining it. And the other one's going to be a presentation. To my shock, these offline reviews, when we look at portfolios at the website, when I was doing intern hiring, we had about 2 to 3 minutes per portfolio. So I just want to call that out to show that it's really important to be scannable. Like the audience will not be reading everything. You need to be able to quickly communicate some really key concepts in a really readable way. And this is where design skills are going to come in and help you out, using hierarchy, using our tools for helping track people, helping people's eyes move through and digest your really important pieces of information. I'm not joking when I said it's fast, really, really fast. And that goal is to get a phone screen or an interview. And then the next step is the presentation. And so this is when you're actually in that interview. And this time you get a lot more time to explain what was happening. And you're there to really to represent yourself and to tell the story. And so the presentation itself is going to be a lot more, the pieces that you put together for it are going to be more supportive of your oral presentation. So you can really focus a lot more on visuals. Your slide presentation should still be really clear and concise, but you can get the visuals up there. Totally different formats, even if they're the same story. All right, I wanted to take some time on that because I think it's important to realize that these are 2 different audiences. I'll also say that typically during a phone screen, it's fine to present off your website, but when you're in person, you really do want to have a presentation. Okay, cool. We can move to the next one. I'll also say this presentation that I put together, I'm so interested to hear what other people in the industry have to say. It's going to be a combination of some like Nielsen Norman best practices, just because that's my go-to and they looked good to me, along with sort of my own personal cheat sheets for things that I, have just kind of scrappily collected through the years. All right, we can go to the next slide, please, Vivian. Is it going? Vivian, can you take me to the next slide? Is my screen?
I think she's having a few technical difficulties. We'll work it out in a second.
No worries. I will follow along with you. Cool. So I can actually just keep talking. I've got a presentation over here on my side, so I won't let this slow us down. So the first slide the first step is really about selecting projects, and depending on where you're at, you might have a big group of projects to pull from, or you might be, just using what you've got, which is great. But really, when you're looking at what projects you want to select, the first thing to really think about is what type of role are you looking for? And I think early career, it's really important to try on a lot of different things. For me, I've worked with Best Buy, which is a retail experience, an online retail experience. And then I've also worked in enterprise. And for me, having both those experiences helped me understand that I'm an enterprise designer. I like building tools for people. I like building tools for technical people specifically. So it's nice to try on a bunch of things, but really think about what you're trying to move into. When you're looking at projects, you want to pick projects where you provided the most value. And in student work, that could be, it depends on what you've had the opportunity to work on, but something to think about in case you've had that experience. You also want to pick projects that showcase collaboration. And again, in student work, yeah, great, thank you. Really thinking about, where did you work with other people? Did you have the opportunity to work with other people? And what did that look like? How, because in the real world or in industry, we're not working on our own almost ever. I think for student work, it's really important. Where did you learn the most is really interesting. Picking projects where you really understood something new or had some really deep insights or the opportunity to practice some new skills. Obviously projects that show a wide variety of design skills. So, what got to showcased if you got to do research or some deep exploration on something, where did you use, design's not just the final outcome, it's that whole process of getting the final outcome. Real world constraints. So as you're looking at, if you got to work with a budget or, whatever sort of real world constraints, time constraints, anything that feels the most real world is going to be good to be picking up. And then I love, what are you the most proud of? And I have kind of a caveat on this because I think it's really nice to see, but do note that if it's not aligned with what the job requirements are for the job you're applying to, don't prioritize it. It's like fun to have on the side or like as a quick note. But when people are evaluating you for hire for a job position, they want to see the work that's the most relevant to what you can bring to the table there. That being said, often these sorts of like projects that are really fun to work on show a lot of good ownership and show a lot of good, show your ability to be curious and interested in things. So there's no reason to hide them. I just wouldn't lead with that if it doesn't match the job role. All right, cool. Let's go to the next one. And then this one's pretty much ripped straight from Nielsen Norman. And I thought this was really good. This is just kind of generic portfolio stuff. So in design, and I will say this whole presentation that I've put together is super focused on product design or UX design. Graphic design is going to look a little bit different, but I still think I've been interviewing for graphic designers recently, and I think it's really important to still make sure that you have a good understanding of why this solution worked in your situation. So context setting really matters. So, just real quickly, you're going to start with the problem. What was the ask? What was your role in it? And who was the team? What were you in charge of versus, what did you collaborate with others on? How did you come to the proposed solution? So how did you approach it? What was your design strategy? And when I'm evaluating this, I'm looking to see that the designer understands why they're doing each activity and not just going through the motions. Because at this point, we kind of know the basic life cycle of a design project, but I want to know that the designer really understands why each design method was important and what those insights were. So how you came to the proposed solution, for me, that's like the big deal. And then how did those solve the problem? Hopefully that's part of the story is, circling back, here was the problem. Here's, how we broke it down. Here's how I solved it. And this is why it meets the problem. And this is why I know is bonus points if you can measure why it solves the problem. No need to cover up the challenges. It's really nice to see how people push through challenges. Especially honestly for me, most of the time this is like technical constraints or like budget constraints, where maybe we didn't optimize for whatever the sweetest design was just because we wanted to build it instead. And then how it affects your users and business. Basically, how are you going to measure it? How are you measuring it? What did you consider successful, and why did it help your audience and the business? And of course, what you learned, which is especially important for students, because when students get hired, we're hiring that those real curious people. I'm at Amazon. Our leadership principle is like learn to be curious, and for students that's super important. It's important for everyone, but especially students. Cool, so we can move on from this. Do time check. I can talk a lot, so let me make sure I'm on track. So this is my own personal process. I'll run through it really fast. This is how I approach creating my portfolio. My first recommendation for everyone is to just document everything. And I personally do this. Editing it's harder, but I personally will just document a whole project while it's fresh in my head. I'll write down everyone I collaborated with, what all the struggles were, how I solved problems, the things that keep me awake at night that I have a hard time because I just can't land on a solution. Those are what I document. At Amazon, we use the STAR method, which is pretty standard, and it's basically just situation. I think someone's unmuted them. I think they're muted. But I think they have the, situation, action, result. So when I write down my stuff, it's just here was the situation I was in, here was the ask and the environment and the timeline and all of that. Here's what I did. How did I, take that ask and provide a lot of value? And here's the result. Here's why it mattered. I personally keep anecdotes, especially things, usually for me, the signal that it's anecdote worthy is if it was stressful. If it was hard and challenging and I lost some sleep over it, then usually it's an interesting anecdote. The other thing you want to think about is what do you want the audience to take away? When you have a case study, what do you want them to walk away with? This is super important. So do you want them to walk away with a deep understanding that you're a great graphic designer and you did a bunch of explorations? Or do you want them to understand that you took a really complex problem and broke it down? Or are you trying to communicate that you knew all the right research methods? But whatever it is, make sure that you have a clear prioritized list of what you want the audience to take away so that you can come back and check this later. From there, I established the structure. That's just basic, design stuff. You can kind of put together the story there and then edit. Pretty much I like to say document everything and then you keep this for you. This will be what you kind of refer to later when you're in the future interviewing and you want to remember the details. After this point, edit, all those little details are not for the audience. They don't want to know all of them. They want to know, the big insights and how they mapped to your design decisions. Enhance using visuals. Don't be shy to make new visuals, even if you didn't need them for the project. I've done that in my portfolio where I needed to add some extra visuals to show what I was trying to accomplish for an audience that wasn't deeply familiar with my project. So, when I'm presenting to people internally who know all the context and know the world that we're living in, I don't need to explain the basics. But if I'm, if it's a new audience who is not familiar, what does it take to get them to understand what the context is as fast as possible? And you might need to do some extra work for that. And then, of course, get feedback, which is what we're all here for. Cool. And then let's go to the next one. Okay, these are from Nielsen Norman. I'm not going to read these out loud, But again, both in your portfolio, both in the website especially, presentation a little bit less so, but in the website you need to design for scannability. And so this is me just reminding you how important that is. You know, how do you pull people's eyes through the story? How do you, you know, get them to understand the details? I'll pause here just to say that something that I didn't write down, but when I'm evaluating a portfolio, what I'm doing is I'm looking at how one insight from one activity has led to the design decision for the next activity. So I want to see a logical thread between what you did, what you found out by doing it, and how that affected the design decisions that you've made. And then often that's an iterative process, but I want to see insight turn into design decision. And so when I'm scanning a website, a portfolio, that's literally what I'm looking for. And I leave it up to the designer to tell me, you know, what's true. Like, I'm not going to challenge what's true. If you tell me that this is true, then I'll believe you. But I want to see that logical thread that says, you know, I did this, I found this out, and then it led me to the next step, where I did this and I found something else out and it led me to the next step. When I scan, that's what I want to read. So I want to see insights and decisions. Cool, we can go to the next slide. This is my personal cheat sheet that I use, a little cleaned up. That is when I'm debriefing for interviews and I'm writing the feedback and I'm really, you know, thinking about what I saw in that person's portfolio. Not every portfolio is going to show everything. So, you know, everyone's going to have some strengths and some areas that they can improve. There's also the reality of time constraints. So you just don't get to do everything. But the things that I'm looking for is, again, that storytelling. I want to see that logical thread. I want to see customer obsession. That's an Amazon leadership principle, but I really love that as a leadership principle. And as a UX designer or a product designer or any designer, we need to be obsessed with who the audience is, whether they're a customer or not. I personally, one of the things that I find to work really well is when you're presenting your portfolio to present it in the customer's voice. So, you know, as this user, I would go here, I go here, I notice this, I get alerted, whatever it is. But if you can, you know, just speaking in the voice of the customer can really help communicate that you're focused on that end user. I like to see design logic, and I like that to be in design language. So, you know, design language isn't jargon that talks over people's heads. It's you know, the language that helps people understand your design decisions that you're making. So I like to hear intentions, reasoning, and how you made that decision. How did insights turn into design decisions? Process, obviously. I'm looking for, when I'm evaluating a portfolio, I'm looking for, so not everyone has the budget to do good research and stuff, but I'm looking for, you know, how did this designer take an ambiguous problem, break it down to its core essence, learn from that, and then put it back together in a way that's going to be smoother and easier for the user to use. So it's important to have some sort of like customer insights, whatever that is, whether you had good funding for research or not. But that's kind of the nuts to bolts. Everyone's going to be looking for design process. Things that these are word dumps, but these are word dumps that I truly think about just all the time. I like to see in a portfolio, how did someone optimize for something? So we can't design for everything. How did that designer, what was their judgment in how they chose what to prioritize, which use cases to prioritize? How did they make trade-offs? How did they, and you know, that's really where I can help understand what those trade-offs were, if those trade-offs felt right for the context that they set. So, you know, tell this story, it's important to see how people make decisions. And then this is a word dump: complexity, ambiguity, scale, systems thinking, scope, visuals. These are things that I just like, that's my just cheat sheet of jog my mind, you know, anything to think about in those. And then of course, outcomes and lessons learned are important. for everyone. And often that's like, if I could do something, if I could do the next step, what would the next step be? If I could change anything, what would I change next? If I had done anything differently, what would I have done differently? Things like that. Cool. And then how are we on time? Oh, I've run out of time. That's okay. The next 2 slides are just kind of my takeaways, or the things that I want y'all to take away. I had common pitfalls too. Edit the too much text and explanation. People just get long-winded, as I have here. But edit it down, make sure it's punchy and people can quickly scan. Don't shy away from the complexity, but do present it in a way that shows that you have ownership of it. You understood how to manage that complexity. You broke it down and you made it simple. This is a pet peeve of mine. I get, my spidey sense gets raised when I see hand wavy words. So I like really specifics, even if it's like I tested with one person who, whatever it was, I want to hear real specifics. And then of course, this is a design problem. Work backwards from your audience. And I'll leave that there. Okay, I have two more slides that are just my like takeaways. If you don't mind going to the next one. This is all really redundant, so I'll go through it really fast. Know why? We are designers. We are, I think of us as logicians, but we are logic people, and we need to know why everything. And even when you don't make a decision, that's a decision not to make that decision. So everything's a decision. You should know why every little thing happened. Set context, use hierarchy, show process, explain trade-offs. I think we talked about all these already. So the next slide, let me see if there's anything. Yep. Speak like a designer as much as you can. Like the more you can use those sort of design terms, again, not to talk over people's heads, but just to show, in your storytelling, show that you have good grasp of concepts, and show, that this concept, how you use different design concepts in context of the work you've done. Bonus points if you can show how you lead with design. So for me, when I see candidates who really demonstrate this well, it's like, oh, the team didn't really know what we were doing. I used this design technique to help get buy-in or help get clarity, but how did you use design to push a project forward? And then again, treat it like a design exercise. We should be working backwards from the audience. Thank you. That was a big dump, and I'm sorry for going over, but I'll turn it over to Vivian.
Yeah, fantastic. So Vivian's having a few technical difficulties, but we're all good. So we're going to have a quick Q&A. This is open to everyone about just portfolios in general, whether that's from a specific discipline or just in general. So yeah, feel free to put your questions in the chat if you'd like, or you can raise your hand and we will unmute you.
Maybe to get things going, can I ask the graphic designers in the room if there's anything that they'd like to add, or any sort of caveats to what I presented here, which is really UX focused?
I think that's me. Yeah, I mean, you covered a lot of stuff. I took notes myself to just keep in mind for my future as well. I think the difference is just in terminology, but we're covering the same things. Definitely UX design is based more in research, and those decisions are made based on facts that you've tested out, or something like that. But I think graphic design, we do that as well, and it's all part of the storytelling process of how you got to that solution. And it could have been a really long road to get to this really simple design, but all of that is the same design thinking principles that UX designers use. So I don't really have anything to add. I think I would just I love what you said at the end about how did you use design to move a project forward, and that's like a great way to just a great lens to describe your projects with, because we're doing it and we just need to be more aware of it so that we can then tell people about it. But it's all those little decisions that you don't think are noteworthy, but they really are, and they show how smart you are. So great job, Courtney. I loved your presentation.
Oh, thank you.
Fantastic. I have a quick question, specifically for UX and product design. So when it comes to like having an ideal number of projects, how many is considered like ideal? And how many should be like personal projects versus like actual work experience?
That's a great question. So I typically see 2 to 3 projects. And the third one's usually there to kind of round out what's missing in the other 2. So for example, I'm really heavily, an enterprise designer. So I might have a third project that shows like, hey, I know enough about visual design to not mess up, like hire me. But that's typically what I see. I prefer to go deep in a project and to really see kind of the end to end rather than see a lot of littles. But graphic design can look a lot different, where it is a lot more like you're kind of getting assets out the door. The projects I've worked on have tended to be bigger. I'm curious, anyone else have thoughts on that?
I'll say with graphic design that, yeah, I've always shown like more than 2 to 3. So I want to say it's been more like 10 projects that I've gotten through. And a lot of times when you're in the actual interview, you can kind of pace out like whether you need to speed up and like skip over projects to get to like a really good one, or if the conversation, leads you in a different direction, you can kind of flip through. I've always brought a physical book as well, and that just might be aging me, but graphic designers like the, tactileness of things. So I've always shown my craft by like actually making a portfolio book and printing things out and bringing in the, the folders and the invitations, so that they can get the feel of the paper I chose and the end user experience that way.
Yeah, I think I'm along with Courtney of like 2 to 3 projects. I probably won't even get to a third a lot of times. It's sometimes it's just like filler, kind of like filling gaps, but ultimately like 2 good case studies that are really in depth they take a while to get through. And honestly, even as I continue to interview, kind of where I am in my career, like that's actually, I mean, and a lot of times it's gone down to 1 project. Like I will do a presentation based on 1 project and go really in depth into the process and why, what was the end result, what were the KPIs we were measuring, how do we measure success, and like it'll be 1 project and it'll take an hour to present.
Just a quick reminder for all students to include which discipline you're interested in inside your name so that we could put you in the right breakout room after.
And then you were asking, Kevin, I think you were also asking about the difference between student and industry work. Anything that you've actually taken through implementation is going to be prioritized. You should just automatically do that. That being said, it takes a while before you have that to be able to present. And so in the meantime, I would personally, buy anything that's like, was a real world ask or was really showed your ability to collaborate. And again, I'm a UX designer. Anything that you've worked with engineers on to actually deliver to your end customer should take priority. But that's not always an option. And so student work is great. Again, just really think about what had real world constraints. And if it didn't, I would try to put some constraints around it. Because in industry, people want you to build stuff in the real world, and the real world just has constraints. Time and money is hard, and resources, it's just really hard. So I think highlighting your ability to collaborate is really important. I would think hard about that. But if you have a student project though that went a lot deeper than something that might have been a real world deliverable or an industry deliverable, that might be something to balance. Is like I might prioritize the thing that got shipped and built, but then my next project's is going to show how I really dove deep on something that was maybe more of a research and an exploratory discovery sort of project. So it just depends. But again, remember, your audience, an industry audience, is going to want you. They want to know that you can come in and do work for them and deliver results for them. So that anything that shows that is going to be prioritized over stuff that was, you know, less so.